Hello, everyone. We're back with another episode of. I'm rebranding. We're not going to call it the Weekly Cataclysm anymore. I think we're going to call it the Experimental Cataclysm for a couple of reasons. Mostly just because I don't know that there's always going to be content for a weekly show, and I'd rather come in, once every 2 weeks, or really when something big drops, and then talk about it as necessary. So. Probably not going to be a weekly show anymore. I didn't do one last week because I had some stuff going on and I didn't think, there was that much to be excited about, which in hindsight, probably a mistake. There was some cool stuff that came down the pipe. I just didn't have time to work with it. This week we're going to be taking a look at a few of the recent changes, but we're going to be talking mostly about the new crouching mechanic, which we mentioned previously, and we're going to be talking about the new battery system. And so I've already recorded those. We're going to tack those on at the end. Right now we're just going to look at some of the other changes that came down that I'm a big fan of over the last 2 weeks. So number one, we're going to talk about the ability to randomize scenarios in new game random character. Previously I've complained when you start... Okay, that broke apparently. Previously when you would start a new game as a random character, you would get always in the evac shelter. Let's, this one. And I never liked that. I always wanted the ability to randomize your scenario. You still can't technically do that, but you'll see we started a random character, and here we're starting at the school, which is contrary to how it used to be, and we're a teacher, and so on and so forth. It randomized our scenario, which is great. The one problem I have is that if you go to scenario, there's no way to randomize it from this screen. I would like to be able to hold down, just like if we go, just like if we go to profession, also does not have a random. But if we go to, we can randomize our name, we can randomize our gender. We just can't randomize the scenario. I don't understand. And the profession, I don't understand why we can't hit a button, have it randomly select one of these, and then have it randomly select a profession from the list of available professions. I appreciate very much that they added this in for the random character, but I would also like the ability to do it directly from that screen. And that's, again, is being a little nitpicky. If we're being honest, all you really need is from this random character screen. You don't necessarily need it once you go into the actual character, because at that point it would be randomized already and it wouldn't be an issue. But it is I'm a little nitpicky. But I wanted to point that out. I thought that was a good change. Obviously not a huge, gonna change the way you play the game, but it's nice to have that option to fully randomize a character, whereas before you could randomize your character, but you would always begin in the evac shelter, which I always really hated. So wanted to mention that. Next, we have something that is very new. This was opened yesterday. Very, very new idea. We had discussed it a little bit on the forum. I don't have the forum open. We had discussed it a little bit on the forum about having mounts in the game. I want to really stress right up front, this is work in progress. There's currently no system in place for this. This person is working, David P.W. Brown, is trying to work within the vehicle system in order to make a rideable horse. And currently, basically what happens is you have a horse or whatever, and when you use it on a tamed horse, you get a saddle, you use it on a tamed horse, and then the horse is basically transformed into a vehicle. This is a very hacky way to do it. Everybody keeps using that word hacky, which makes sense because it's not a system that was designed for organic vehicles. It was designed for a vehicle that is, what's the word for that? Modular, right? Everything is meant to be broken down into a tile by tile basis. Everything is based on parts and electrical current and fuel consumption. It's not meant for a horse. So I wanted to mention this. It just came up on the radar yesterday. Literally 22 hours ago this came up. But I love the idea. I love the idea of mounts being in the game for just a ton of reasons. Obviously from a realism perspective, in the zombie apocalypse, there would be benefits to having an animal mount as opposed to driving a vehicle. There are a lot of little things I love about it. But the main thing I love about it is that if this gets its own system, if this gets developed into something that can reliably do what they're trying to do, then I can make a mod where you can ride like unicorns and minotaurs and shit, which obviously has nothing to do with Cataclysm, but I really want to make that happen. So I'm very interested to see where this goes. Again, very hacky, very obviously working within a system that was not intended to do this. But I love that somebody is putting in the effort to at least try. You know, I often, when I would do my modding stuff, I would not be able to figure out how to do what I wanted because the systems of the game were not set up to do what I wanted. And so you would learn to try to like make things work even if it's not optimal because you don't want to code, you just want to work within an existing system. And I really respect people who take the time to, you know, anybody in here can look and say, okay, well, riding a horse as a motor vehicle that clangs when you smack it is probably not, you know, ideal. But the fact that they're trying anyway, I really respect that. I appreciate when people do that kind of stuff. So I wanted to mention it because, I mean, obviously, again, very new, very work in progress. I just love that they're trying. You know, it's just props, man. Like, good on you for trying. Next, we got this location a few days ago. I think about 2 weeks ago, we got this implemented. When did this go up? Merged 15 days ago. Oh, didn't mean to click that. Basically, this adds a regional airport to the game. I thought this was really cool when I first saw it. I thought, like, man, you know, we don't have an airport. And I expected it to be a big sprawling thing, and it's really not. But they did mention somewhere that they had an interest in making an international airport as well as a possibly like apocalyptic version, which lots of zombies, failed evacuation, etc. And I just think that that's so great to have not only something that you created that's really awesome, but also to have plans to continue working in that same vein to expand things further. And if we look at, there's a big picture of it somewhere. Here we go. This is the airstrip from the airport. Oh, I guess it's the entire airport apparently. Obviously a long runway. I just love that they took the time to, you know, get the dotted lines right and all that stuff, because that's very tedious and annoying, and I just, you know, it's cool. It's a cool, I love map gen. I love when I get to see new locations in the game. And just looking at it, it doesn't really look like airports I've been to personally, but I've never been to a small airport. I've only ever been to a huge airport. So I love it. I love that they put this in here. I love that it's already in the game. I love that they took feedback. Partway through, they were getting feedback, and they didn't gripe about it. They didn't complain. They didn't, you know, get fussy over, oh, I made this and I want it to be the way I want it. No, they, you know, adapted to the changes, and we ended up with a pretty cool little map gen. How about that? So, wanted to give a shout out to Lovum. Oh, good Lord. I don't know how to say your name, and I apologize. Yep, can't say that. Okay. So good job to you, and I appreciate that you spent the time, and hopefully other people do as well. I think this was a great little bit of map gen. I mean, and I say little bit, it's probably not a little bit. This is probably like, I mean, it's so many overmap tiles, I assume. Like this would be like one overmap tile, I imagine. So this is just enormous. But so just good work. Glad to see that. Thought I would point it out to people. I don't know how rare they are. I imagine that the spawn requirements on something this size would be pretty intensive. So they're not, I mean, obviously this isn't going to pop up in the middle of a town. But I haven't seen one in game. I would like to. This is pretty cool. I love map gen. I love when people put map gen in the game. Next is another little thing I wanted to mention. This one, I mean, it is what it is. It's so basically lifting tools such as crane and things like that will assist with wielding very heavy items. So if you're within, I think it has to be eyesight. He goes into an example of how to use this and what would help. Basically, they're standing here. Doors are shut, blocking the boom crane on the left. So which are you using then? So they're closed and they're blocking the boom cranes, and you'll see if they're crafting a batch of 20 anvils, they're about 750 kilos overweight, which is, I'm surprised they're alive. And then they open the door, which grants them access to this crane, which has lifting. And when they open the door and have access to that, the anvils now no longer take up 800 kilos in their inventory. And so this will help you when you're trying to remove, and carry around things like the, what are they called? The storage batteries. Obviously, they use the example of anvils, although, let's be honest, you're probably never going to craft 20 anvils at a time. But for when you pick up things like engines to try and move them along. Because I think, if I understand how this works, you could use the crane to remove the engine from the car, because you need the crane to remove the engine. Then you could pick up the engine, because this crane will assist you in lifting that object. Then you could grab the crane and walk, pulling the crane back to your base. Whereas before, if you removed the engine from the car and you had the crane, you would have to use advanced inventory to move the engine one tile at a time or two tiles at a time, because you couldn't pick it up and walk. Your stamina would sap immediately. You would be overburdened. So this, I believe, is how that works. If you have a movable crane, you could just drag it, and it would enable you to carry that engine you picked up 6 blocks away all the way back to base without all that much grief. Or say you find a keg. I found a keg of whiskey in my current Let's Play. This would enable me to carry, 800 portions of whiskey back to the base without struggling and constantly dropping and using advanced inventory. So although this is like something that you could go many games without ever actually using this particular new ability, the fact that it exists will help a lot of people who understand that they can use this to their benefit. So wanted to point that out, because if you haven't, if you've moved heavy things, you know what I'm talking about. So I just wanted to point this out. I thought this was a great change. So yeah, I love it. Love it. I always love these. I can't remember the last time we had a change where I was like, man, I hate this change. Although I'm not a fan of the crouching mechanic, which we will get into next, I assume. And then, because I've already recorded these, I'm going to put in the crouching next. And then I'm going to put in where we talk about batteries. I am going to point out I have a tendency to over-explain things. So hopefully you won't be too bothered by that. We're just going to give a quick rundown of how crouching works, how you can see the values, and then we're going to talk about battery, the different types of battery, and how they work basically in the game now that we've had this big battery change. So I'm going to pass you off to me, and hopefully I'm as charismatic as I always am. So let's talk about the new crouching system. Previously, if you hit the double quote button, it would toggle you between run and walk. Now you can toggle to crouching as well. It's a new movement mode. And while you're crouching, you're much less visible to enemies. So here we've walked up to a window which would normally expose us to quite a few things. But if we go into the look menu, you'll see none of these creatures have seen us. Now if we toggle again into walk mode and we check again, you'll see now the zombie has seen us. Because we're in a different movement mode. Now if we go back to crouching and we look again, you'll see they no longer can see us. And this is part of the new crouching mechanic. It's generally treated as you being lower profile. I don't know that they really necessarily want it to be crouching. I pointed out some issues and I was told that it's more about you being low profile, and they use the example of GTA 5. If you've played GTA 5, your character doesn't actually crouch. They just sort of hunch a little bit. They move a little more slowly. It quiets their movements and things like that. So why can't the zombie see us now when it could see us before? Well, we're crouching, and if we look using the X menu, which is the look command, I believe is what that's called. We look at this window, you'll see it says coverage 60%. And that is part of the new movement crouching mechanics. If we look at the table here, is that a table? It is a counter. It also has a 60% coverage rate. Same with the sofa. The bookcase actually has 80% coverage. The chair has 40% coverage, and this is the easiest way to tell how much cover any given item has. Mailbox has 0, which kind of makes sense. Vehicles also have a coverage value. For here it is 60, and you'll see if we hover over open ground, it's 0% coverage. I'm not 100% on how coverage works, but I do know that it interferes with enemies' vision, and the higher that percentage, the more likely you are to be concealed. The only other thing I can mention of that is that anything with a coverage of 80 or more is generally treated as something you can't move through. I don't know if that's true just while crouching or if that is also true while walking and sprinting. I don't know if they've given 80% only to items you can't move through, or if they've made it so that anything with 80% coverage cannot be moved through while crouching. They are probably sound exactly the same to you, but they are different things, and I'm not sure what exactly that... I'm not 100% on the math, basically. So, again, right now, currently, we're basically invisible to all these monsters, although now I see the zombie has spotted us, which is fine. And then we move one tile back and he can no longer see us. And this raises my main issue with the new crouching mechanic, is that it's super, super good. So good that you really should be using crouching anytime you're in really anywhere, right? I've seen it to where I've had creatures literally right here and I'm crouching, but they can't see me because I'm crouching. And it's a little ridiculous. I understand there's a high coverage, presumably our character is, maybe leaning and trying to make themselves low profile. I understand the logic of it, but from a gameplay perspective, right now I think it's super OP and it needs to be nerfed a lot. I've suggested that they nerf it based on vision. So like we're at this counter here, we have a coverage of 60%. Well, our vision should reflect that, in my opinion. It should partially block our vision and make we have to peek around obstacles in order to actually get sight lines. And thus, when we peek, it would expose us a little bit more. Because I think it's a little unfair to have zombies be impeded by the obstacle, but have your character be seeing as though he were perfectly standing and able to see just fine. That's my quick and dirty thing. I think it's the easiest way to convey it to a player, that they have cover. That's my opinion. It was met with a lot of resistance when I mentioned it. So I don't know that it's going to go that route, but I do think that in my opinion, that's the best way to go, to quickly and easily relay that information to the player anyway. So I just wanted to touch on that. I do also want to point out, for people who hate the crouching mechanics, don't search here. So we can toggle run. You'll see we have the cycle move mode, which is the double quotes, which is what it has historically been. It would normally toggle between walk and run. I believe that you can set... No, let's not mess with that. But basically you can set now the independent keys. So maybe you don't like the idea of using double quotes and having to cycle. Oh, I don't want to walk, I wanted to run. Well, now I want to walk, but I don't want to have to go through crouching. Well, now you can set those things independently. You can set the forward slash is killing me. Walk mode, you can set by default it's unbound. You can set a run mode, and you can set a crouch toggle as well. So instead of having to cycle through using the double quotes, you can actually create an independent key specifically for that particular movement mode. I personally think that for a roguelike, it's kind of hard to find available keys that you can use this for, but that option is there, and I do firmly believe that although cycle movement mode is just fine, I think that they do need their independent buttons. I was hoping that as the game progresses, we would have one for toggling your movement speed and one for toggling your stance. As in, one button would toggle walk or run, and then another button would toggle crouch, prone, standing type thing. But obviously that's not, prone is not currently implemented in the game. I know that Kevin does want eventually to get to that point, but right now we don't have a prone. And I'm not really sure that that's even on the agenda. I think that that's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, I would really like that in the game, but I have bigger issues I'm trying to work on right now. So I wouldn't hold your breath on getting a prone, but the other thing about this is that The crouch mode, again, I think it's OP, but I also think that this is like baby steps, right? This is the first step in implementing a fully fledged stealth system into the game. There should be a way to stealth up behind a zombie and stealthily take them out without all the other horde knowing. I would like to see things like cones of vision rather than this sort of ambient, if you're within range, they can see you type situation. And I think that these sort of implementations, these sort of changes to the game, enable you to make additional changes down the road that will greatly improve the game. So I think that this is like a baby step in the right direction. I do think it needs some tweaking. I think it needs some changing. Maybe coverage values should change. Everything basically has a 60. Most furniture has a 60. Wall, of course, the wall has 100% coverage, which makes perfect sense. But a lot of the things you'll bump into in a house will have 60%. If we teleport, also recently changed the debug menu, which I understand why they did it, but I currently hate it. So the benches only have 35% coverage. Maybe they have been tweaked since I last looked at them. Because when I played before, it seemed like everything around me had 60% coverage, which I thought was very high. So these do have lower coverage values, so that's nice. Maybe disregard my complaints. So I wanted to cover the crouching system. That probably about does it. There's not much more that you need to know than that. I would highly recommend you use crouching basically everywhere. It is worth noting it doubles the movement speed. So if we go to crouching, you'll see we previously had like 105. Now we're up at 300. If we go back to walking, we're back to 105. So it does drastically increase the number of, increases the movement time. So it does slow you down considerably, but really anytime you're out of combat and you're not traveling from point A to point B, you should probably be crouching. If you're clearing a building, you might as well crouch, because anything outside will be much less likely to see you if you happen to walk through. I mean, previously I would be terrified to walk into a position like this, but now that I'm crouching, only one of those enemies has seen me. Despite there being, 5 things within sight, including a thorny shambler, which is a new creature, I believe. But we can talk about that another time. So, outside of combat and outside of travel, say, if we're walking from here back to base, we're obviously not going to crouch that whole way. It would just slow us down and cost us more daylight or nightlight or whatever. Obviously not valuable in that situation to crouch, but in most looting situations, crouching is absolutely the way to go. Because normally, anyone who has played knows that if you walked up to a window like this, you would be exposed to the world. In fact, if we go to walking and we look, really only one still? Okay, well, previously, it seemed like I couldn't walk up to a window without everything seeing us, and the crouching has helped me a lot with that. So, just wanted to talk about that. We're going to move on to something else, I guess. So let's talk about batteries. Now, batteries have had a huge overhaul recently. You probably have noticed that the old style batteries are not spawning anymore, and when you unload various tools, they now grant you different types of batteries. And so we're here on the GitHub. We're going to look at the PR for this, and I don't know if you can see this on mobile. Oh, I can't. There we go. Make this huge and visible. So basically, all batteries previously were universal. They could be used in any item, and they were kind of built where you would have 100 battery, but the actual batteries weren't 100 of them. It was the charge represented by that cumulative total of batteries, which is a very abstract, kind of confusing way to do things. I mean, I totally get why it was in the game and why it existed that way. But it is something people have complained about for a while, or at least said, hey, why don't we fix this? And so finally, Inglonious has seemed to have done that. It's a complete overhaul of how battery-powered tools are handled, with the intent of making that aspect of the game less abstract and more realistic, which is great. Yes. All batteries are now magazine style, and all tools that formerly accepted batteries now accept these magazines instead. You cannot unload or reload the batteries directly, but they do have the recharge flag. There are 3.5 categories of batteries and are detailed in the compatibility chart below. compatibility chart, which is what I wanted to show you, is these charts. Basically, there are now 4 types of batteries, and each battery contains charges. Okay, these charges can be recharged, but you can't reload them by hand. You can't combine 2 ultralight batteries into one fully charged ultralight battery. You can't do that kind of stuff. So let's look at the different types. There's the ultralight battery. These are very, very tiny batteries that are meant to be in things like game watches or talking dolls. You can think of these like, well, you've probably seen watch batteries of coin cell. You can think of these as coin cell batteries. This is where size is important, or the manufacturers are cheap bastards, which is why it's standard in a talking doll. Tools in this category have batteries that are compatibility. So basically, there are 2 types of light batteries. There is the ultralight battery and the regular light battery. Anything that uses a light battery can also use an ultralight battery. However, things that use ultralight batteries cannot use light batteries because they're too large. So a flashlight, which normally uses a light battery, you could replace that with the battery from a game watch, and the flashlight would still work. It just wouldn't have the same number of charges. You'll see here the maximum charges for an ultralight battery is 50, for a light battery is 100, and then a light plus is 150. I believe light plus is just like a high quality version of the light battery. You'll see all the batteries have that except for the ultralight, which is treated as light minus. Next, we have medium batteries. These are larger batteries that contain much larger charges and are required for larger tools. So, for instance, the cordless drill uses a medium battery, and the L stick, which I don't even know what that is. I think is that the light stick? Requires a medium plus battery. I assume it requires it. I would imagine that similarly, medium batteries you would find on modern cordless tool. The high capacity ones are for things like military grade equipment, okay, and fancier electronics. Well, that makes sense. I don't know if you could use a medium battery in a medium plus item. We will check that out momentarily. We'll talk about that in a few moments. And then finally, we have heavy batteries. These are things that are industrial car batteries in everything but name. High capacity heavy batteries currently only come standard on a UPS. Okay. So these are for much larger charges that are required for much larger tools. And again, they basically are saying, hey, these are large and basically like car batteries. If you have created a new game in the last few weeks, you should no longer encounter, since the inception of this, which was 16 days. No. When was this merged? Good Lord, this text is big. It was right in front of me. It was merged 7 days ago. So if you've started a new game in the last 7 days, you should no longer encounter the old type batteries. You should only be encountering the new standard clip type batteries. And we'll talk about what I mean by clip type in a few moments. But if you've been playing a game that has existed since before that was merged, so more than 7 days ago, you will still have old style batteries that you can use in your tools. I'm pretty sure they still work universally, no problem. They're just not migrated out yet. But you will no longer encounter old type batteries. You will start seeing these new batteries, which is what has been happening to me in my current Let's Play. We still have old batteries, but we're not finding them anymore. Now we're finding these particular batteries. So let's jump in the game and we'll look at some of them and we'll talk about what they do and don't fit in and what they mean by magazine style. So here I've loaded up a save game. I've debugged some items in my game where we can see the examples of the four basic types. You'll see here we have an ultralight battery, which as we discussed has a maximum of 50 charges, light batteries 100, heavy batteries 1000, and medium batteries 500. Which is fine. You will also notice that these have 0 charges in them. I actually don't know how to make them spawn with charges, which is unfortunate. But let's spawn ourselves. No, don't quit. Let's spawn. They changed the debug menu on me, and it's a little confusing to me. Let's spawn a game watch. Go ahead and spawn one of those, and we will spawn a what was a light? Flashlight. Let's spawn a flashlight. So if we look at these items, the flashlight and game watch both come with batteries. Oh, they don't apparently spawn with batteries in them. That's unfortunate. But if we look at the flashlight, you'll see that it can accommodate a light battery cell, an ultralight battery cell, or a light battery cell that is high capacity. So the flashlight, which is a light item, can use all three of these particular battery types. It could not use a medium or heavy, but it can use any of the light or ultralight variants. However, if we look at the game watch, as we discussed, this can only accommodate an ultralight battery because the battery compartment is so small, it can only use a very, very tiny battery. Now let's look also at, say, a light stick, an L stick, because we want to know, does it require a medium plus or does it require any medium battery? So we'll go to light stick. No, please stop. I wish they hadn't changed this menu. I get why they did it, but I'm so, used to it being the way it was. So let's look at the light stick, or the L stick rather. And you'll see it can use any medium battery cell, which is just great. So they are compatible with basically anything that uses a medium battery can use either medium battery, and anything that uses a heavy battery can use either of the heavy batteries. And same with the light. However, they don't jump compatibility. Anything that requires a light battery charge cannot use a medium or heavy battery charge. And same is true for all the other sizes. Now, what we mean when we say magazine is that if we look at the old battery, oh my goodness. So if we look at the old batteries, you'll see that they're just loose charges of batteries. And when you would put these in, you would basically load the amount of charge into the battery. This doesn't represent 200 actual batteries. It represents 200 charges of batteries. However, now when we see these new batteries, these actually do represent singular individual. This is one light battery that has 0 of 100 battery charges. Okay, and I don't know how to make them spawn with charges, otherwise I would illustrate that point. But I can't seem to make that happen with the debug menu. I don't know how to do that. So, now when you find batteries, here we have an MP3 player that has 100 of 100 charges. So if we unload the MP3 player, you'll see we've gained no room. Oh, I didn't have room in my inventory. You'll see it dropped a light battery cell with 100 of 100 charges. This is a singular battery that came out of the MP3 player that can be used in anything that requires a light or reinforced light battery, and it has 100 of 100 charges. As you use this battery, it will deteriorate this number of charges until it reaches 0, at which point it will become a regular light battery cell with 0 of 100 charges that, until you recharge it, is just a random battery. It's just like if you took the batteries out of your remote and they died or they had charge. It's that simple. It's meant to be a more reflective of real life batteries and how they work, instead of this abstract notion of kind of loose floating battery charges. All of that might sound confusing. It's really not. I believe that any one of these cells can be recharged at a UPS station. I believe is currently the only way to recharge them. I'm not 100% on that yet. Maybe we'll talk about that in the future, but I imagine it's pretty straightforward. So I wanted to point this out because it is a change. You can think of these like clips instead of thinking, oh, I have to put 100 batteries in my flashlight to make it fully charged. No, you can stick one fully charged light battery like you would put a clip of ammunition in a gun to make a gun work. This is just like a clip of 100 battery charges that you're going to load into your electronics. You can just think of it just like putting a magazine in a gun. Maybe I've been talking about this too much. Maybe it's a little more straightforward than I'm giving credit for. But when I first saw these things, I was very confused. I didn't know that the battery change had taken place, and I didn't really know what I was looking at. So I figured maybe you didn't either, and we would talk about it. So that's probably going to do it for the batteries but I did want to talk about them. I hope I elaborated in a way that makes sense. I feel like I maybe rambled and didn't give the best explanation I could give. So that's going to do it, I think, for this episode of Experimental Cataclysm. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, feel free to click that like button. If you really enjoyed it, maybe click that subscribe button. I put up Cataclysm videos basically every day of the week. And we're going to be expanding into some other things in the near future that I'm very excited for, but very nervous that I got to get them just right, or I'm going to probably never get around to posting them. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next week or two with another episode where we will discuss all of the new things that have come to the Cataclysm, and I'll keep you informed.